Okay, today we're going to look at the Declaration of Independence, which is, thank you, Ian. Hi, Ian. Okay, which is section 6 of E Pluribus Unum. Out of many comes one. And so go ahead and get your heading down and we'll move on into the Declaration of Independence. Okay, so let's look at some background first. We know that Richard Henry Lee was a member of the Second Continental Congress, and he introduced a resolution to that Congress in June of 1776 that said that the 13 colonies were now free and independent states. Remember, shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. Boston had been under siege by the British troops. So Congress on that day did not vote. Instead, what they did was set a vote for early July of 1776. On that day, though, what they did do was they formed a committee, a subcommittee, called a Committee of Five. That's important to remember. We called them a Committee of Five because it was a committee of five really big thinkers: Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Richard Sherman, all of them from different colonies. It was felt that the resolution for independence needed to be explained in writing. So as you see, they're pictured below, and they were given a writing task. So that writing task was to explain why the colonies were declaring independence. That was probably the easy part of the task. The harder part was going to be that they had to persuade three different groups of people in that declaration for different reasons. The document would need to persuade those colonists who were still loyal to the mother country. Remember what we talked about in terms of Thomas Paine and common sense. He's persuaded a lot of the colonists that their loyalty is no longer merited, that Great Britain doesn't deserve it anymore. But there were still those people who believed that we should make up with, as in the Olive Branch Petition, with Great Britain. So they had to be persuaded that independence was the way to go. Now, another group of people are the English people in Great Britain or in England who did understand why the colonists who understood what the colonists were going through. And those people had to be persuaded to go to King George and to Parliament and say, end this war on our people. Okay? Finally, they needed to persuade foreign governments like France and Spain that they could be a viable country on their own that was worthy of foreign aid. Think of foreign loans, money, troops, supplies, to help them fight the English and begin their new country. So that Committee of Five, headed by Thomas Jefferson, structured the Declaration this way. There are three distinctive parts. The first part is called the Statement of Intent. In that Statement of Intent, we know that they say all men are created equal, that all men deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and they outlined the enlightened ideas, those philosophies that the colonists were now embracing, that they had rights that were beyond being controlled by a monarchy or a king. The second part is a list of 27 grievances, 27 things that King George and Parliament had repeatedly done to show that he was committed to being an absolute tyrant. Things like the Stamp Act, things like the Quartering Act, things like sending the troops against the British, and what they said against the British colonists. And what they said was, King George III has plundered our seas, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. So they listed out the reasons why they had to break up with King George and England. Finally, the last part was their declaration of complete independence from Britain. So they've started off with, this is what our intent, that we are all created equal and we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They explained why, everything that King George had done, and Parliament, of course. And finally, they end with saying that we're completely independent from Britain now. We are our own country. We are the United States of America. And each man who signed was basically saying he was willing to hang for treason by signing that document if the war for independence was not successful. Each man, quote, pledged to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor in support of the new United States of America. Now, the Declaration of Independence itself, believe it or not, as you know from that Teen Biz article I had you read called Words Matter, Jefferson didn't just sit down and write the perfect declaration. Hardly anybody sits down and writes something like that. Nobody does in one writing. It went through revisions, which is why I make you do revisions, people. It was brought before Congress, debated, and revised even again. This was an important document. They couldn't just write it and send it. The Southern delegates actually read it and refused to have a statement blaming the king for slavery in the Declaration. They were so adamant against it, it was removed in order to be able to send that declaration and to be able to get the Southern delegates to support independence, to support this new country that was being formed. You know the date, July 4, 1776. The colonies voted 12-0 to approve the Declaration. New York abstained. They refused to vote. John Hancock, as President of Congress, remember John Hancock, the famed smuggler, signed the bottom, and we know the rest. Now, we know the rest, but I also want to talk to you about the revisions a little bit, only a tiny bit.
Nothing like that. We were really busy.
Okay, so I want to show you just a tiny bit of the revision. This is an actual picture of the one of the actual drafts of the Declaration of Independence, and it's written in Thomas Jefferson's handwriting. And if you take a look at it, you'll see that what we have is Thomas Jefferson writing a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. Okay, no problem there. But then what we know is the very beginning, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for, oh, he added the word one, people. I think he added it, to dissolve the political bands. Hold it, what was below that? Because look at all that writing that's crossed out. So let's take a look at how it was revised. Let's look at that next screen. Okay, so what we see here is, in yellow, we see where things were struck out and possible additions were put in. In blue, we see what was put in its place. So what it says is, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for a people to, it did say, advance from the subordination in which they have hitherto remained. That got changed to, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for a people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, in other words, to dissolve their political government connections, and to assume among the powers of the earth, notice this one, the equal and independent station. That gets changed to the separate and equal. That's going to show up again in the 1900s when we talk about separate and equal services, places, opportunities provided to people of color or African Americans as being something that's a founding idea of our founding fathers. It's kind of sad. I liked equal independent better. But it got argued out. It got changed. So station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the change. No, they got more specific, to the separation. We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable. They took that out because that was too much on God, actually. We hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, completely transparent, obvious. That all men are created equal and independent. They cross that out again, and that's that, once again, the changing the wording to make people happy, because we have a whole continent of slaves in our country at this time. That from the equal creation, they derive rights inherent and inalienable. That gets changed too. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights that among these are not the preservation of, but are, just make it straightforward, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these, not ends, rights, let's be very specific, Much better word there. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, in other words, from the vote, that whenever any government, any form of government shall become, and it goes on. It's important to understand that these people did not just dash off these ideas. They really, really argued about them, talked about them, revised them, and made them what they are today. And that's our history. You know what to do next.